During the age of the samurai in medieval Japan, battles took place all across the country. Of the many weapons available to combatants, the sword was the one of choice for duels and vendettas. The samurai devoted themselves to swordsmanship, to protect their lives and pursue justice. One such samurai was the founder of Iaido, Hayashizaki Jinsuke Shigenobu. He established techniques to deal with diverse situations. Those who absorbed his teaching acquired the ability to draw a sword and dispatch an enemy with a single blow. Once the sword was drawn, though, there was no turning back. Unsheathing the sword meant exposing one's own life. By the 17th century, lethal encounters had fallen out of favor as a means of settling disputes. Samurai were left with very few opportunities to draw their swords. That brought about a change in the purpose of training. Rather than improving technique to become even more deadly, the samurai began devoting attention to resolving problems without drawing the sword. The sword became a last resort, to pursue justice and protect honor when all else had failed. In all but exceptional situations, a fight to the finish was a fight to be avoided. The samurai spirit cultivated in the Edo period was elevated to a martial art by the legendary swordsman Nakayama Hakudo. This is the man considered by many to be the most powerful figure in the history of Japanese martial arts. He excelled at many of them, and as a swordsman, no one was his equal. Despite his prowess, he pursued a style of Iaido that emphasized the importance of winning without fighting. The master was adamant about refraining from meaningless conflict as much as possible. The sword was simply a tool in the service of the spirit. What the spirit could accomplish on its own transcended the strength of steel. Nakayama's teachings have been passed down across generations to this day. The practice that originated as an effective means of killing evolved into a martial art that is pursued as a method of cultivating the mind.
Why did you start Iaido?
When I'm practicing Iaido, I forget about everything else. I concentrate completely on Iaido, so it's quite refreshing.
As the head of our dojo says, Iaido is all about conquering the enemy within oneself. It's not about confronting an opponent. It's confronting your own imperfections. In sports, the idea is to win. Once you've achieved your goal, that's it. But martial arts training has no end. The more you learn, the more there is to know.
The samurai sword is part of the inheritance of generations of Japanese. Its cutting edge is said to be sharper than any blade in the world. The sword is hard but flexible, highly effective for its intended use. Although it's a weapon, it possesses the beauty of a work of art. Some say it's the soul of the samurai. The craftsmen who create these objects have a story of their own to tell. The steel for a Japanese sword is produced from iron sand. A clay furnace is used to melt the iron. The furnace is lined with alternating layers of iron sand and charcoal and is heated to 1400 degrees Celsius. Veteran swordsmiths maintain a vigil over the smelting for 3 days and 3 nights. The furnace has to be maintained at a constant temperature. The end result of this process is raw steel found at the bottom of the furnace. The swordsmith selects the steel with the percentage of impurities most suited to making blades. The raw steel is broken into pieces. The pieces are layered and fired. The steel layers are then hammered together so that the heat distribution is uniform. Then they're folded and hammered again. This process is repeated over and over, creating a blade that consists of countless numbers of layers. That combination makes it both hard and flexible. The blade can be considered as having several sections, each needing different qualities. The swordsmith caters to those variations in adjusting the thickness and forming the shape of the blade. Once the blade is in the desired shape, the smith applies a clay coating. The layer of clay is thick at the back ridge and thin at the edge. The difference in thickness provides different qualities to each section as the blade is heated and quenched. The sharp side cools and hardens rapidly. The back ridge takes considerably longer. That variance helps achieve the paradox of a first-class samurai sword: stability and flexibility. The final stage in the process is sharpening. This is accomplished by a specialist polisher, typically someone whose family has been in the business for generations. Upon receiving the unfinished blade, the polisher will work on it continuously, 10 hours a day, day after day, for 3 weeks. Once it is properly polished, the blade will be so sharp that even the slightest touch will draw blood. The sword is infused with the spirit of all those who worked on it, and only then is entrusted to one who has been properly prepared to use it. Many people who practice Iaido are mesmerized by the sword itself. Englishman Trevor Jones is among them. He's a 7th Dan, the highest rank ever achieved by someone from outside Japan.
I think the European sword, certainly the broadsword, was more like a hacking weapon, breaking bones rather than actually cutting like the Japanese sword, certainly. I think there are 2 aspects to that. First of all, from the spiritual side of things, the Japanese sword in history has represented justice and honor, and it's a symbol of Japanese spirit, whether we think of it as samurai spirit or, you know, even in modern times. On the other hand, from a practical point of view, it's also a weapon and a training tool.